right, here we go with number 75, and this one is all about how some powers are too big for just one entity, and they're just too delicate for an entire crowd. And this is in 75. Hamilton's back with us again, and he's trying to tackle the question that goes to like the heart of foreign policy, and that is who should represent the United States when it comes to making binding agreements with foreign nations. Who's going to negotiate treaties? And if you give that power to one person, then you risk corruption. You also have problems with secrecy and then abuse of power. But if you give it to a large assembly, well, you risk things like indecision or leaks or even just, turmoil or chaos or whatever. And so Hamilton's answer is a constitutional compromise. Treaties require the president's energy and also the Senate's wisdom, not just one or the other. They have to work together. I'm Matt Hasquin. I'm a high school history and civics teacher. And we're going through all 85 of the Federalist Papers, and we're up to 75. We got 10 to go after this one. So, hey, let's set the stage here, talk about something that's not real exciting, but we'll get into the treaty powers between the Senate and the President. The framers, they had already divided the war powers, right? Congress declares war. The President conducts the war as commander-in-chief. Treaties kind of posed a similar challenge because a treaty can tie the country for decades with other countries, or it can impact territory, shape alliances, it can influence trade. It can also determine if whether or not you have war or peace. And so this isn't really legislation. This is not executive action. It's diplomacy. And there's high stakes, there's long-term aspects here, and there's some deep consequences. And Hamilton believes that diplomacy demands strength that is paired with supervision. And his central argument, his core claim here is that treaty making is neither purely legislative nor purely executive. So it has to be shared by both powers. Well, why? Well, because treaties require, secrecy, which is about executive strength, and then deliberation, which comes to the Senate, speed, which is supposed to be the decisiveness of the executive, stability, which is the consent of the Senate, and then just involving national legitimacy, which is shared responsibility. And no single branch can offer all that. So Hamilton then goes on to warn, why the president alone can't have treaty power, because giving the president sole authority to make treaties is kind of dangerous. So a president that's acting on their own can be bribed by foreign powers or can pursue some type of personal prestige. They may make secret arrangements for themselves, or they could act impulsively to gain some type of short-term advantage. Maybe they'll sacrifice long-term national interests or possibly negotiate treaties that favor their political allies. Because the president is a single human being, and he can act quickly, and he can also act unwisely. And Hamilton believes the president must negotiate, but cannot bind the nation to something without the Senate. Now, on the other hand, why can't the Senate all by itself have the treaty power? Well, Hamilton's going to reject giving the treaty power the treaty authority solely to the Senate because the Senate is too large, it's too slow, it's too public, it's prone to leaks, and it's subject to faction, which will later become political parties. And then also, you got divided state interests, because you have to remember the states are represented in the Senate, especially prior to the 17th Amendment. So the diplomacy of what's going on with treaties requires secrecy and unity in purpose and some kind of coherent strategy and quick responses. And so if you have a legislative body, they can't meet those demands. And so the Senate acts as a stabilizing force, and it's not a negotiating instrument. So then, why does sharing power work best? Well, he sees treaty making as this perfect example of kind of like a mixed authority. The president provides the energy, the power behind it, and the Senate provides the restraint, right? So together, they create protection against corruption and balance against any kind of hasty decisions or increasing national legitimacy, bipartisan or regional consensus, shared accountability, and continuity in foreign policy. They're all on the same page, and neither can dominate, and then neither can also act alone. So there's that balance there. This is deliberate, according to Hamilton. Now, he does argue strongly in favor of requiring a 2/3 Senate vote to ratify treaties. Because if that's the rule, it's supposed to prevent treaties made by narrow majorities or sectional alliances based on the states or any type of partisan entanglements, unstable foreign commitments, or even short-lived agreements that will disappear, in the next election cycle. And so this is to ensure that treaties reflect a broader national agreement. And Hamilton believes international commitments should be durable, not partisan, right? So it's taking care of the whole. Now, there is a danger of corruption, there is danger of personal motivation, and he does raise a subtle point because foreign governments will always try to influence American officials. If one person held the entire treaty power, that person becomes an irresistible target for bribery or flattery or just manipulation. But bribing 2/3 of the Senate, that's a lot more difficult. It's practically impossible. But anyway, the shared power disperses that temptation. So this is more of kind of like, a constitutional realism. So Hamilton then goes on to emphasize a conceptual distinction between treaties and legislation or laws, because laws apply internally and treaties bind the nation externally, because laws can be repealed easily, treaties can't. And so when you have foreign relations, it demands things like consistency and long-term strategy and trustworthiness and, well, just stable commitments. And this is why treaties require more than just ordinary lawmaking procedures, because they involve the entire country and not just a single policy. Now, if we look at Hamilton's reasoning, his 5 reasons why, treaty making requires secrecy and energy and unity. It also requires deliberation and stability and collective judgment. It gives the power to one person, or giving that power to one person risks corruption and impulsiveness. Giving it to a large assembly risks delay and leaks and faction. So sharing the power balances strength and restraint, which creates legitimacy and prevents abuse. That's number 75. Now, as far as what we see with the tone that Hamilton's thrown out here, he's writing this essay with the tone of being kind of a foreign policy strategist, someone who understands diplomacy, and also he sees diplomacy as a world of pressure and negotiation, but also long-term commitments. So this essay shows Hamilton at his most constitutional. He's very measured, he's very pragmatic, he's aware of the complexities when it comes to governing here. Now, the moral dimension is more about power is safest when shared and most effective when balanced. So the president negotiates, the Senate decides. It's kind of this elegant constitutional dance. Now, in our modern times, number 75 is shaping debates on things like international agreements, executive agreements, Senate treaty ratification, diplomacy, foreign policy oversight, presidential authority, national security, of course, and then just the separation of powers when it comes to foreign affairs. So every modern treaty fight, from alliances to trade pacts, echoes Hamilton's logic from number 75. Our 3 takeaways would be, well, the treaty power can't belong to a single person, and the Senate alone is too slow and too divided to handle diplomacy, and the shared power protects the nation, but also strengthens legitimacy. Number 75, it explains why the Constitution makes the treaty power a shared responsibility. And Hamilton understood that treaties define a nation's role in the world, and that power must be used wisely and carefully, and with broad agreement. A president acting alone could endanger the nation. A Senate acting alone could paralyze it. And together they create a foreign policy that is both strategic and stable. So, hopefully this one helped clear up some issues, or if maybe you had some questions about the way the treaty power works. I know we don't see treaties a whole lot anymore. We see more executive agreements between the president and foreign powers, and executive agreements don't need a Senate approval. And so that's one way that the executive branch tries to skirt past treaties. So, you avoid the Treaty of Versailles effect, where the Senate won't act upon it. But anyway, hey, hang around for number 76, because in 76, we're going to talk about the president's power to appoint officers and the